Hello and welcome. My name is Tom. This is the Enthusiasm Project Season 9, Episode 3. Oh gee, I've got some good things for thee. Yeah, today actually we're going to talk about learning, because one of the things I wanted to do this season is have episodes that focus on like foundational concrete takeaways that you can take away from each episode. And I was thinking a big part of learning anything kind of comes from how you approach learning things, what you decide to focus on, what you decide to learn, and all that. And I thought maybe an episode about that in a way would be a smart thing to do. But before we do that, let's talk about equipment. I am using a brand new microphone, and I am being potentially foolish in using it for the very first time right now. I've not done like any testing or anything. So this is the first time I'm using this one, but I'm trusting it because it's the Lewitt LCT 440 Pure. I was using the 240 Pro, which I still have, and I made the video about. And after the video came out, Lewitt reached out to me and said, hey, we see lots of people in the comments talking about the 440. Do you want to try the 440? And I said, here's the ethics statement. Are you cool with that? And they were completely on board and sent it. They were super nice. It's really everybody I've met from every audio company, or all the audio people I've met. So at this point, that's Rode, Sennheiser, Earthworks, Lewitt, and Shure. Everybody's been like, the audio people are the nicest people. It's just kind of stunning. And they're not even, I think there's a level of competitiveness, like if they come out with a new product, they want it to do well or outperform a competitors. But I've talked to people who, they have friends at people with competing companies, and they're excited about the competitors' products. And I don't know. It just seems really like happy and healthy. It's nice. So anyway, Lewitt sent me the 440, which I'm using right now. This is the first time I'm using it. Plugged it in, set it all up. I did do a very quick, like 20-second comparison just for my own, I don't know, use between this and the 240. And I definitely need to do more. The 240 sounds great. The biggest difference between the two, I thought the 440 itself was significantly bigger, but it's not. It's the same exact body size, housing size as the 240. And it comes with, or at least the one they sent me, I don't know if this is a standard one, it comes with the shock mount and with the pop filter that I bought extra for the 240. The biggest difference is the capsule inside is huge. It's a large diaphragm condenser versus the 240's smaller diaphragm condenser. But this seems to sound really good. From what I'm hearing right now, it's just running into the Rodecaster Pro II. And it sounds pretty darn amazing to my ears as I'm listening to it. I really like it. The thing I'm curious about, though, which I think might be the case, is the larger capsule. There might not be any actual science behind this. Seems like it might pick up a little more environmental sound than the smaller capsule of the 240, which could make a difference in which one you're choosing, depending on where you're recording, where you're going to be using the microphone. But I want to do a lot more comparisons and testing between these two. Super excited to have this one, because when I made the 240 video, and I love the 240 so much, so many people were just talking about, you should try the 440, and it was in my shopping cart. I was going to buy it eventually, but then when Lewitt said, hey, you just want to try it? Sure, I'll do that. They also sent something called the Connect 6, which I didn't really know about. It turns out it's not a game. But Lewitt has their own audio interface, which I guess can take up to 6 different types of inputs. And it's almost like their version of like a Vocaster. It's a pretty simple one, so it's not like really like a Go XLR or a Rodecaster or anything. I haven't experimented with that yet, but I'm excited to dive into that. So I appreciate that very much. But if there are any issues with this microphone, definitely blame me. Don't blame the microphone, because I'm still learning how to use this microphone. Because that's what today's episode is all about, right? Is learning new things. Yes. And before we jump into that, again, I do have a viewer submission. I'll be doing a Q&A. This season's Q&A episode will be episode 5, as usual. So next week, I'll send out a reminder of like, hey, when and how to submit questions. But you can always submit feedback and stuff anytime. It doesn't have to be just for the Q&A episode. So I do have it's a video, but I'll get to see it and you'll get to hear it, from Bailey Stone checking in. This one, I haven't listened to it or watched it yet. I trust Bailey. So Bailey, I'm trusting you. I guess if you're listening to this, that means it wasn't anything crazy or inappropriate. But sometimes it's fun to listen to stuff beforehand so I can formulate coherent responses. But other times I think it's kind of neat to listen to things on the fly and sort of have like the immediate response. And so that's what I'm going to be doing now. I just thought it would be fun. So anyway, let's check in with Bailey and hear what he has to say.
Tom, so I just wanted to call into the new season, as I generally do. Firstly, bit of a different call in. I'm just using my new phone, my iPhone 11 camera today, because the honest truth is that I don't feel like going down to my studio, turning everything on for 5 minutes and then turning it all off again. So that's pretty much it. But I wanted to talk about a couple of things that I was thinking about as I was listening to last season and also listening to the premiere of this season. The first thing was that I felt like obviously you've stopped doing the couples table with Heather, and I feel like that's really kind of, I don't know how to really word it, but I feel like I've become more disconnected with you. So I kind of wanted to ask, like, how are you going overall? That kind of stuff. On the Riverside sponsorship last season, I was honestly a bit surprised when I saw that you were sponsoring last season. And obviously, like, I'm not having a go at you or anything because it's completely fine, but it just, I don't know, I wasn't expecting it, but I think it worked pretty well, honestly. It wasn't irritating at all for me, so that's always good. And the last thing I wanted to kind of mention was that I got a new laptop for Christmas. It's the base model M1, just the standard M1 from 2020, because it was on sale for Boxing Day, which is basically the day after Christmas. Don't know if you have it in America, but for us, Boxing Day. And so yeah, it was like $500 off, so I got it. And you might notice I'm watching your video on Tombuck 2 when you got all your new NAN lights. I've kind of been on a bit of a NAN light flow, I guess. Like, I've always been watching NAN light videos, obviously, from you and from other creators, but I've been watching a lot of them more recently. But anyway, that's pretty much it. Bit of a probably longer message, but welcome to the new season, I guess. I hope you enjoy it. And I'm guessing this won't come out for a few weeks just because you've probably been pre-recording. But anyway, can't wait to hear your response. But yeah, just interested in how you're going overall. Thanks.
Alrighty, thank you, Bailey. I'm glad I didn't listen to this beforehand, but I did make a few notes as I was listening to it because I wanted to touch on everything. So first off, thank you for the message. If you would like to send a message at any time, you can just send it to tom@enthusiasmproject.com. You don't have to do anything fancy. Bailey will just record with his phone. It's fine. And if you want to make it even simpler than that, you don't want to attach a file or anything, you can just go to himynameistom.com, scroll down the homepage a little bit, and there's a part there that says like, submit a thing right now, and you can attach a file if you want, or you can just click record and it will use, whatever built-in microphone your computer has. You can record, send it immediately, and that's pretty cool. So if you want to do that anytime. Okay. So first, Bailey, I feel so bad about the disconnected thing because I was like, oh, you know what? I miss Bailey, and there's a few other people too that I feel like I used to talk to a lot that I haven't talked to as much lately, but things change. Like everything ebbs and flows, and people come and go, and priorities shift. And it's funny because with Bailey, with you specifically, I was like, oh, he's super busy. Like, I know he's got 10,000 things happening. He's super busy. Totally makes sense, that we wouldn't see each other as much. But you're right, because Heather and I don't do the couples table. It's not you, it's me. It's an interesting thing because the couples table, we did one not that long ago, but they're not like the regular. For a couple of years, we did like every Thursday, 1 p.m. Pacific time was the stream on her channel. And that was really nice, but it definitely got to a point where it was kind of hard to schedule around like this fixed thing that's just always there. And, after doing something like that for 2 years, it's tough to feel like you're not just repeating yourself. And as much as we like just hanging out with the stream, we always felt like it was a little bit of a cop-out to go, oh, we'll just do a Q&A or a hangout or whatever, every time. I wanted it to be a little more, just a little bit more specific. And then especially, it's not just one person's schedule, but it's two people's schedule. So it just got kind of difficult to do, but I miss the regular interaction. and it makes me want to do more live streams on my channel, but I'm like kind of scared to do streams on my channel because I don't know how to do like a simple stream. They're always kind of a spectacle, which is fun. Like I love doing those. I love the mic showdowns. I love that, but they're always kind of big. Even if I say I'm going to stream for an hour, it ends up being 2.5 hours. And there's usually quite a bit of setup. And I usually get nervous. Like the channel's bigger than I ever thought it would be, even though I know it's not the biggest channel in the world. And the streams, it's really cool to see the streams grow, and there can be several hundred people there at a time. But that's also, it's hard for me not to like really want to cater in real time to as many of those hundreds of needs as possible. And it gets very tiring and kind of scary and stressful versus like the couples table. I think we were averaging at like the peak 30-ish, 35 viewers at a time. And obviously not everyone's in the chat. So that was a lot more manageable, and it was a lot of regulars. So I don't know. What I want to do is more like channel supporter stuff, Patreon and channel members, because that does narrow it down to a smaller group of people that I feel, if I just want to turn on a camera and hang out with people for a little bit without having to put on a whole big thing, that feels like a more comfortable group to do that with. But it's also, there's also a paywall there, so it's not as accessible. So I don't know. And then weeks go by, and the holidays were just insane. I had all these like, I want to do streams and I want to do second channel videos. And then it was like between the podcast and getting sick and the holidays and the regular videos and the podcast sponsorship and the Nanlite sponsored video and the Sennheiser sponsored video. There was just like not time to focus on anything else. But anyway, you're right. I do feel a bit more disconnected, and I would love to take proactive steps to avoid that. This podcast is a great one there. For the next point, Riverside. I'm glad the sponsorship didn't annoy you. That's good. And there was a lot of, it wasn't something that I took lightly, which I'm sure you know. And especially like as someone who uses Ecamm a lot, it was sort of weird to go, hey, I'm going to use this other thing here. But the reason I wanted to do that was because at the time, I really didn't trust Ecamm's interview mode. I love everything about Ecamm, but the interview mode for me, I had problems with every time I tried to use it. There was always a lag, always a delay. It was like, it just wasn't reliable enough for me to want to use, whereas that's like all Riverside does. It doesn't do all the other stuff Ecamm does. It just does remote recording, and it's super simple for the other person. The number of times I had people get confused with Ecamm was kind of a lot, and so I thought Riverside was a very niche thing. We had originally talked, I think 2 years ago, about doing a sponsored video. And I said, I don't really want to do a sponsored video. And then, we kind of stayed in touch, and they came back last fall, wanted to do another sponsored video. And that's when I was like, you know what, let's try the podcast thing. And we did that, and that was fine. And it taught me that I just don't want to do sponsored podcasts, but I'd never done one before. And so I wanted to give it a try. And again, like I mentioned in episode 1 of this season, it had nothing to do with Riverside, but in the spirit of learning about things, let me try it. Let me see what that feels like to do a sponsored podcast. And it's just not something that I want to do more of. And I learned that, but I totally understand why people do want to do them. And that's cool too. And then also, I'm glad that the timing worked out the way it did, because at the end of January, Ecamm released a huge update, which now, they've revamped like everything, especially the interview mode. And now they have independent, isolated video recording. It's not cloud-based like Riverside is. So Ecamm is going to be more intense on your computer and the other person's computer. Well, no, not the other person's, just your computer. It requires more computer power than Riverside does, because Riverside is all browser-based for everybody. But you can now record separate audio and video through Ecamm. And I think you can have more interview people. So the features kind of overlap a little bit more. If you have a really powerful computer and it's a Mac, then Ecamm makes a lot more sense. If you don't have a super powerful computer, or you just want to stick browser based and keep it super simple, and you don't need the other streaming features, then Riverside probably makes more sense as well. I've heard people say they had trouble with Riverside and things didn't work out, but I can say for me, I have never had any issues as a guest or as a host, which is great. So I've had a good experience with Riverside. I had a good experience talking with them. I feel confident in the product. I just don't want to do sponsored videos or podcasts anymore. So there's that there. I do want to congratulate you on the new laptop, which is very cool. We do not have Boxing Day in the US. And for a long time, I thought it was a day where there was a big boxing match, like Super Bowl Sunday. It's Boxing Day. I didn't realize it was like the packing up from the holidays, I guess, like putting everything back in boxes and then stores just clear out all their stuff, kind of like a Black Friday. But that's cool. And the M1, amazing. It's crazy because I know like the M2s came out, the M2 Max Pro, and all this stuff. And it's like the leap from Intel to M1 was so massive. The jump from M1 to M2 or whatever is so much smaller than that. That the M1, like the discounted M1 that you were able to get, is so much more powerful than the like top of the line Intel i9 MacBook that I had before getting M1. It's crazy. So I hope you have a lot of fun with that one. And NAND lights, I do really, really love NAND light. I have more lights than a human being needs right now, but I think NAND light's really interesting. They've always been so kind and supportive to me. The thing that's confusing with Nanlite is it's a big company. So they have like Nanlite Global, which is based in China. And then they have like a European Nanlite. They have Nanlite US. And they all operate semi-independently. Like it's the same products, but it's like when I did my sponsored Nanlite video, I was working, and the one Bailey was talking about where they sent all the lights, that was Nanlite US. And so that's the one I've dealt with, and they have been so great, and they're just so cool. And it's interesting. I saw somebody ask a question yesterday about Aperture and why there's Aperture Amaran lights, and now there are Amaran lights as a separate brand. And it's been interesting to watch Aperture grow because I was aware of them before Nanlite, but I knew that they were kind of expensive, but not crazy. You know, they're fine. And then they were really high quality, and they kept adding to their lighting lineup. You know, as technology developed, as they grew, they kept adding to their lights, and that was really fun to see. And then I knew they had these lights that were called Amaran lights, which were it was like a line of, it's almost like a Fender Telecaster. Like the Telecaster is a type of guitar that Fender makes. The Amaran was like a type of light, sort of, that Aperture made. They tended to be a little more budget friendly, but it feels like, as an outsider looking in, that as Aperture continued to grow, they really wanted to and kind of moved into a much more professional market, and their prices moved into much more professional prices. And so then breaking that off into a separate entire line of Amaran lights that are the more like home-based independent creator lights made sense. But what's interesting is Nanlite sort of then filled the gap that Aperture originally filled, where it was like, these are high quality lights that some of them are still quite expensive, but they're relatively affordable when it comes to the world of lighting, and they're still super high quality and stuff. So it's interesting to me that the reasons I originally liked Aperture when I first discovered them are kind of the reasons I like Nanlite now. And I have so many Nanlites that I like. I'll never need new video lights. But anyway, I appreciate that, and glad you're watching second channel videos. Really, really, really want to make more second channel videos. But yeah, just focusing on main channel and podcasts and stuff in the meantime. So let's talk about that, though. Let's talk about learning things. Let's talk about maybe having too many things that you're interested in, because I wanted to call this episode Jack of All Trades, Master of None. And I think there's an add-on to that saying. It's like Jack of all trades, master of none, but sometimes a master of some is better than a master of one, or something like that. A master of many is better than a master of one. I don't know. There's like these things that have been added on to flip-flop on, like, you know, Jack of all trades is typically used as a positive term. He's a jack of all trades. He can do anything. Master of none is, you know, that's kind of a, not derogatory, but a negative term. You can do all the stuff, but you're not really amazing at anything specifically. It's better to be super specialized. And I'm somebody who has always thought maybe I have, and I've been told sometimes, that I have too many hobbies and too many interests, which is maybe true, but I'm not 100% sure if that's possible. I have sometimes in my life felt jealous of people who can focus on one thing, not in like an ADHD way, but in an interest way or a curiosity way. Like, the person who is interested in, I don't know, I was going to say something like woodworking, but I know that can be pretty broad. Let's use that, woodworking. So that's it. That's everything they learn about, everything they're interested in is just that one thing. And they just get better and better and better at that one thing versus someone like me who's like, I really love cameras. Also, let's learn about music. Also, let's learn about this other stuff and this other stuff here. And it's like, and for some reason, I just gravitate towards what ends up being the most expensive hobbies and interests you could have, which is hard to navigate sometimes and not super practical or even possible sometimes. But it's almost like when I look at like home design, like if Heather and I ever go to like a model home or a furniture store or something, and we see those houses that are really, they're almost like monochrome, very minimal, very modern, and very clean. We both love that look. And it's like, this looks so nice and it's great, but neither of us in our own personal actual lives do that. Like we don't do okay, we're going to have 2 colors in this house and 2 pieces of furniture and everything's just going to be super clean. It's definitely much more on the other end of like, let's have as many crazy colors and patterns as possible. And I mean, look at our studios. Like it's very different than just a 1 color wall behind a person talking. Like there's stuff and colors and textures and things. And I feel like that's how it is kind of with the single interest versus multiple interests is I feel jealous of people when they're focused on just the one thing that they love. But I also don't think that would work for me because I want to explore so many different things. And there's so many different things to learn about and how you can approach learning. And sometimes, I think especially as a kid, as an adult, it's not so much of a big deal, or maybe I've learned just how to tune it out. But as a kid, when you want to get interested in something, sometimes people, especially adults, will tell you, this is just a phase. This is just a phase. Oh, you want to do martial arts? That's a phase. You want to do music? That's a phase. Art, whatever. And maybe it is, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that if it is a phase versus something that you stick with for a long time. And not everything needs to be like career focused. Not everything needs to be monetized or, you can do things just because you like it and nobody else has to ever even see it or know about it. And you can still get a lot out of it and it can still end up benefiting you in a lot of other ways in your life. So figuring out whether something's a phase or a hobby, I don't know. Growing up, my best friend who I met when we were like 10 or 11, his parents did a really cool thing. If he wanted something, like, we were the 2 who always played with cameras and made movies together. And he ended up getting like a master's degree in cinematography and doing all this cool stuff. So that was like camera obsession buddy, but was interested in other things too. And if he was ever wanting to do something, or even if he just wanted like a new camera, his parents had the rule of, if you save up half, we will spend the other half. And I thought that was really cool. It didn't matter what it was. If it was something that it was $100 and he saved up $50, they would pitch in the other half. If he wanted something super expensive, a $2,000 camera, I don't know if this ever actually happened, but if he could somehow save up $1,000, then they would get the $2,000 camera. And I thought that was pretty amazing. And they also never really discouraged, because he was like the opposite of me, who was like an indoor, just at home kid. He was somebody who was doing, martial arts and taekwondo and had all the belts hung up on the wall, all the different colors. And he had a drum set and he had cameras and all this kind of stuff. But when something changed, like if he went through taekwondo and loved it and then reached a point where he's like, I don't want to do this anymore, his parents would talk to him and make sure, are you quitting just because you're lazy, or are you quitting because this isn't something for you? And they wouldn't make him feel bad if it was just a phase. And I thought that was pretty cool. Like, just as, as a friend looking at how another friend was interacting with the world and their parents, I thought that was pretty cool. Now, there are some things, if you're interested in stuff. So ultimately what it comes down to is, in the world, there are a lot of really interesting things and fun things to focus on and fun things to learn and explore. At least I think there are. I definitely don't understand the idea of being bored. I don't think I've been bored since I was like 4, and like just a kid that didn't know any better. There's so much to do and so much to focus on and just not enough hours in the day to do it. I don't understand the concept of boredom. So I understand the concept of doing nothing and taking a breather, but actually feeling bored, like, I don't know what to do. I'm bored, makes no sense to me. And I don't know, maybe there's other issues that are attached to that. But some of those things that you're interested in might need to be formalized. If you want to be a doctor, you probably don't want to start on your own. Maybe you could read some stuff or watch some things on your own, but you're not going to start practicing medicine, I hope, on your own. You need formal training, formal education. If you want to be a lawyer, you can't just show up to the courthouse and be like, let me publicly defend somebody right now. Like, I'll do it. You need to learn and have a formalized education in that. And, I think that makes sense. But there are a lot of things you can learn on your own, especially with all of the insane resources that are available online, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. Like YouTube University is very real, and you can get some great stuff there, and a lot of stuff in life, a lot of interests and hobbies. The way that you learn them is just by doing them and just by immersing yourself in them and trying to connect with other people who have experience with them and who do that. And there are also like informally, I guess I'll call them informally formal resources. So I'll take playing the bass, for example. I played guitar for a while. It was just all self-taught, which is great. And then last year I got my new bass, wanted to learn, really like spend time getting good enough where I felt like I deserved the instrument, which I know kind of goes against the idea that like you don't need to earn, or not earn, but deserve your equipment and stuff. But it's a really nice bass, and I wanted to be able to play it more to its full potential rather than what I was able to do. And so I took an online course on how to play bass. Took beginner to badass, which is great. And 10 out of 10 would recommend. It's the only music related thing that's ever clicked for me, and like learned how to understand music and notes and theory and all that stuff from an online course, which is extremely well done. But it's all, like the courses I have, it's totally self-paced. I could have signed up for it and never taken a lesson. I could have not paid attention while I was doing the lesson. So it's very, very self-paced. But it is, it's a formal, there's no reason it couldn't be like a formal music class curriculum. But if you want to learn something too, there are also other classes and things. There are, I'm trying to learn how to ice skate right now. So I signed up for beginner skate lessons, which is just 7 weeks of, quick lessons learned to skate. That doesn't get you a diploma, or it's not tied to a university or anything, but it's like, hey, I want to work with somebody who knows how to teach people how to skate so that I can learn how to skate so I can progress faster and hopefully with fewer injuries along the way. It doesn't necessarily have to be tied to a larger curriculum or a formal school or a formal degree or anything, but there are all these informal ways, some more structured than others, that you can learn. And a lot of times when you're interested in something, you'll find that it has those things connected to it. You do need to sift through and make sure you're not just getting scammed for like some terrible online course or something. But there are really great ones out there, like the podcasting ones and video editing ones I have made, if you want to check the links in the show notes. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And there are really bad ones out there too. The thing I have found, though, about exploring multiple interests and learning different things and being a jack of all trades but a master of none is you can kind of be a master of some. You won't be a master of all everything, but you can get pretty good at a couple things, especially over a long period of time and depending how interested you are in them. And you never ever know how these things are going to connect, which is kind of the most fascinating part to me, honestly, is every time I've gotten interested in something that I think is entirely unrelated to everything else, it ends up being folded in some way. And I think that's just how the brain works. That's, you don't compartmentalize your experiences and your knowledge. And so even if you do something that feels entirely not connected to anything else, at some point, you'll probably find out that it was actually really beneficial to have learned that and have experienced that. Even the same thing I told my students a lot. Learning what you don't like is hugely important. If you try to dive into something, try to explore something. Sometimes students would want to leave my program after a year because they're like, I wanted to do this, and it's not you, it's not the program, it's just I'm not interested in it. I never would make them feel bad for that because it's like, yeah, that's cool. You thought this was for you. Turns out it's not. You'll be really happy that you learned that now instead of like going to school for this after high school and like going to college for this and realizing after you've spent a ton of money and time that this isn't for you. It's way better to learn that now. So, every lesson is an important lesson no matter how you learn it, I guess. And for me, so I'll run down my weird interests and maybe you'll be able to relate to some of this. Cameras, right? Audio, video stuff and cameras, that's always been at the top. That's my number one for sure, and has been since I was 4 years old. Like very clearly, I can remember this, recognize this. Always loved cameras, always loved AV stuff. Even that is really broad though, honestly. Within that, like what kind of cameras? Are you talking about photography? Are you talking about videography? Are you talking about camcorders? Are you talking about cameras where you need to learn about lenses? What about learning all about lighting? What about audio? Audio is a whole separate field, basically. What about the editing and like there's within just like talking about like, oh, cameras are a thing. That's actually a really crazy broad field that is pretty intense and pretty broad. But cameras have always been kind of the core. That's the thing. Even when I spend time on other stuff or want to explore other things, it always comes back to that somehow. And cameras are fun. Like audio video stuff is fun because it inherently lets you explore some of the other stuff differently and capture the other things. Like you can make videos about other things. You can take pictures of other things, record audio of other things. So it's always kind of been, it's been such a good foundational, like core, I don't know if you call it a trade, but interest, whatever it might be, that I've been focused on. That's definitely where I'm strongest. It's for sure. Like that's what I put the most hours into, put the most time into, and have a very, I guess everything I'm interested in is an intrinsic interest. It's not for someone else, for some external reason. It's because I'm interested in it and I want to do it. And that is the reason. And then after that, I think the next thing has, for most of my life, been music, even though I definitely wouldn't say I'm particularly great at it. Definitely a master of none when it comes to music. But, wanting to learn how to play the guitar and then getting a guitar in high school, a really inexpensive, it's right over there. I don't want to make it feel bad, but I have refinished it. Not the greatest guitar in the world, starting there and learning from that. And then, wanting to learn other instruments, like the bass I just mentioned is something that I took really seriously. And now, even though I've played guitar much longer and drums much longer, I would say the bass is my main instrument. Like if I were to join a band, I would want to play bass in the band. I have synthesizers, which are, oh man, learning how to do non-computer based synthesizers with like multiple, like not only like synths, but effects and processors and recorders and mixers and things where you don't need a computer and you can do all the looping and layering and stuff without needing a computer. That's really fun. I got big into that. I still love it, but I got really, really into it maybe like 8 or 9 years ago for a couple of years that I had a whole setup and it was pretty it's pretty crazy and really fun. I tried to learn how to play violin as a kid. I tried to learn the trumpet and the trombone. Those never really took because I didn't have it. Those I should have had a teacher for, and I didn't. And YouTube wasn't even really around at the time, so I probably could have learned maybe a little better with YouTube. But music has always been a huge one. The drums are such a good example of why I think it's important to learn new things and how it's important to take advantage of being able to learn new things. The drums are something that I wanted to start playing when I was 10 years old, and I remember that super specifically. But drums are big, loud, and expensive. And when your family doesn't have a ton of disposable income or space, those are things that your parents probably aren't super excited to get for you. And so I remember it was after my parents had split up and I wanted to play the drums, and my mom came up with a deal for me. And it was such a good deal because I was a student who got pretty good grades. And she said, if you get straight A's through the end of this school year, it was like my 5th grade school year, then I will buy you any drum set. And I specifically remember her saying, if I have to go to the bank and take out a loan, I will do that. Now, of course, at 10 years old in a basically pre-internet era, I had no way of doing any kind of research. Like you could have bought me a $50 kit from Toys R Us and I would have been like, this is a drum set. But that's what she said. And I was super excited about it. But I was also a very impatient boy. And like, I think we got, maybe a month and a half after she made that deal with me, we got sent home progress reports and I did really well. And maybe it was because she was realizing she might have to buy a drum set and what that would entail. But we were somewhere, we were at like a Target or something, and there was a Lego set that I really wanted. It was the space shuttle. It was like a $50 or $60 Lego set, which is expensive, but also $50 or $60 in like 1996. So, or 1995, something like that. Like, there's a lot of money to spend on a Lego set for a 10 or 11-year-old. And I was like, oh, this is so cool. I really want this. Like this, I want this to be like on my birthday list or my Christmas list. And my mom made the deal of like, well, you just got a good progress report. So you can wait and get the drums if you keep your grades up. Or instead of that, I will buy you this Lego set right now. And I was like, immediate versus delayed gratification to an 11-year-old. Please buy me the thing now, please. The future, who knows when that will be. And so I got the the Lego thing and never got the drums. And looking back, that was a brilliant move on my mom's part because it saved her a lot of money, frustration, and just I'm sure she's very glad I didn't get the drums. But then after that, as I got older, we were living in apartments and stuff. And even after I moved out on my own, I was living in apartments. And beyond the cost, because you can get relatively affordable drum sets. And the cool thing about drums is they're so upgradable. They're so modular, I guess. Like the shells themselves, the hardware, the cymbals, like everything can be upgraded in pieces. So as long as you get like a basic kit, it really doesn't even need to be the best one at all. It just needs to be something that lets you keep a rhythm, and then you can sort of fine tune it over time if you need to. But you still need the space for it. You still need to be loud. It just never really happened. And finally, when I bought our house in 2015, I was just about to turn 30, and I remember thinking, when I buy a house, I'm going to have the space for it. I'm going to consider getting a drum set to just be like part of the house loan. Like, I'm paying to have a garage. I'm paying to have a front door. The drum set is an integral part to this house as well. And so it's not actually like folded into the mortgage or anything, but that was when I decided. So right before I turned 30, was able to get the drums. And a big reason for that, I was still debating, like I just spent all this money on a house and moving, and it was, it was crazy. Housing prices I bought the house in 2014, but it wasn't ready until 2015. Very different than they are today, by the way, and lived in a very low cost of living area. So it was nothing extravagant. It's a super nice house, but it's nothing like, we're not living in like a high rise in Manhattan or anything, or on the beach in Santa Monica. Like, it's modest. But still, after all that, I was like, do I really want to do the drums? And the thing about the drums is they're so incredibly physical. It wasn't even about whether or not I could learn those, because I figured at that point, like I could learn this, but maybe I don't need to spend the money on it. Maybe I could wait a few more years and do it. And then I started having the thought of like, yeah, maybe I could wait till I'm 35 or 40, and then I could start playing the drums if I want to. But at that point, I was 30, and I'd wanted to play the drums since I was 10. Clearly, like that interest wasn't going to go away. It had been 20 years, and I still wanted the drums. And if I waited, like I'm going to hopefully end up being 35 or 40 at any point, right? So anyway, so I could have been playing the drums for 5 or 10 years and have 5 or 10 years of experience and skills, or I could just start from scratch at that point in time. And more than that, because the drums are so physical, there really is, more than with other instruments, a limit to when you just can't play them anymore. And especially the kind of music that I like to play and the style of drumming I like to do, it's not something that you can do forever. There's, age and injuries and all kinds of things that can prevent you from playing the drums. That's why they're not in my studio anymore, is because last year I injured my foot, couldn't play the drums for months, and so decided to clear up some space and move them into a different room, which then I just liked having space in my studio. So even though my foot's fine now, I just like having them. I like having space in my studio, but they're a very physical thing. And so I kind of had the idea of like, if something, I can play the drums now, or I could learn, but I'm physically capable of it. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And if there could be something that happens that prevents me from ever being able to do it, and then I'll just never get that experience of something that I wanted for a long time. And that was really what pushed me to go like, okay, I'm going to dive in and buy a drum set and learn about that, because time might start running out at a certain point of time. Like other interests too. Things like 3D printing was big right before I started my YouTube channel. I got really into 3D printing, which is why a lot of my first videos are about 3D printing. And that is something I thought there could be like, practical applications for it. But I thought also like, 3D printing in the classroom, especially in like 2015, 2016, was a pretty big thing, and maybe I could incorporate that into this, but it was also just super fun. And for me, it was something where it was very like mathematical, and I've always struggled with math, and I've always just thought, like whatever you want to call it, a self-limiting belief that I'm bad at math. I'm not someone who can understand math or be good at math. But the way that like, I don't know, the way that things work with 3D printing and 3D design, it just made a lot more sense to me. And that was really kind of cool. And so then I started diving into 3D printing, which, gave me great topics when I later started a YouTube channel and I wanted to make videos. It helped me do some pretty cool stuff in the classroom. It's helped me do, I've done all kinds of videos where it involves something that's 3D printed. And it even helped me to understand like 3D design. Not that I'm good at it. I am not good at it at all, but it helped me understand it a bit better. So when using, there's certain things in like Final Cut or Motion or After Effects or whatever, where you're working on an XYZ coordinate plane, that all makes a lot more sense to me because of the time I spent learning 3D printing, even though there's not necessarily a directly practical application of that knowledge and of that time. It was just something that was fun to explore and something to super fun, to learn about. And that, to me, that's always been super important. I got really, really into cycling about 11 years ago. I had never been into sports, and I'll talk about that in a second, but I had never been into sports. I was never someone who was good at sports. And I had a friend who got really into cycling when we were in college. And I remember thinking, that seems really fun. I'm going to go see about buying a bike. And I was a poor college kid, and I went to the bike shop and I was like, I just want a bike to just kind of like go around the neighborhood, nothing crazy. And it very quickly turned into like, well, you'll be dropping $1,200 on like the bike and the helmet and the accessories. And I was like, nope. And then I waited like 4 more years before I went back to the bike shop. And I was like, okay, this is what I mean, I knew how to ride a bike. Like I had bikes as kids, but not an adult bike. And so I bought my bike and very quickly got really into cycling. And that was just incredibly fun. I went from, I just want a bike to tool around the neighborhood with, and I'll never wear the bike stuff, the bike clothes, to having like the shorts and the jerseys and the bike computers and the shoes that clip into the pedals and the road bike versus the hybrid bike. Like very quickly it became a thing, which it still is to this day. And it's a great form of exercise. But what I found that it ended up being was a great place to brainstorm. Prior to YouTube, when I was teaching, especially on bike rides during the summer, that's where I would like come up with so many lessons and workshops, and even outlines for entire school years or semesters would be on the bike. After starting YouTube, the bike became a place where like, that's where I can outline so many videos. I've, put together courses while riding my bike. Like it's just the thing that lets my brain work in a way at being better than the other things, even though that's not why I wanted to start riding a bike. I just wanted to get outside and get some exercise, like it was supposed to be totally separate from everything. And then it became a pretty integral part to a lot of things, even YouTube, like the interest of learning about YouTube and making videos for myself. That was supposed to be something that was entirely separate from my job. I had this job that I thought was kind of taking the fun out of making stuff and not letting me make stuff for myself. So let me start a YouTube channel. That's going to be totally separate from my job. And now it is my job. And prior to that, creating on YouTube helped me to be a better teacher, and being a teacher helped me to be a better YouTube creator until the point that YouTube was able to become my job, which is not what I would have expected. But then looking back at all the other stuff, like how useful it's been, I'm trying to like formulate everything. Just being interested in cameras from being 4 years old to being a YouTube creator as my job now makes a lot of sense. All the time I spent in high school and even after high school and trying to do that computerless setup and everything, all the time trying to record audio for bad music that I was making, that's become hugely helpful as I've wanted to get into podcasting and streaming and making videos explaining this stuff. And that's a lot of time and a lot of experience to draw off of. It's wild to me how everything kind of comes together at a certain point, and you just never know, like the more stuff that you add, the more things you explore, how you're going to be able to incorporate those. And I don't think you should go into it with that being the goal. Like, if I learn this new thing, it will definitely help me, be better at business or something. But you just never know. Like, I think that the key is, if you're curious about something, the fact that you're curious about it means your brain is telling you something, your body or your soul, whatever it is telling you something, that this is worth exploring. And the worst thing that's going to happen, I guess you could lose some money or something, but you're just going to find out that it's not for you and you're not that interested in it. But if you don't do it, then you'll never know. And I feel like the regret of not knowing is way worse than trying something and figuring out you don't like it. And the past year has just been so ridiculous, because on top of all of those things, for me personally, YouTube and cameras and music and cycling and all that stuff, in the past year, I also started taking flying lessons to earn a pilot's license, which has been, one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. Honestly, I used to be scared of flying. Now I'm excited to go stall a plane. Like, yay. It's very different. And that right there is worth it. Like, even if I can't finish the program for some reason and couldn't ever actually get my license, just the experiences that I've had, the knowledge I've gained, the stuff I've been able to do so far, 100% worth it. Even though you could look at it as like, well, if you don't get your license, then it's money that's totally wasted. But then you could look at it as, well, if you do get your license, it's still going to be the super expensive thing. And what? That's not even your job. It's like, it is really expensive, like flying's super expensive. But when I started the program, which is a more formalized flight training, you can literally find someone who's a flight instructor, which could just be like a person with a plane. Cool. Or you can go to college for it and everything in between. I found a more formalized flight school that it's not connected with a university, but it is like an FAA accredited flight school. Most of the students there are younger people who are working to become career commercial airline pilots. And then there are a few other people who are doing it recreationally and have different goals and stuff. So it's kind of cool, because the standards, airline pilots have some of the highest standards, at least like out of the military, for what they have to do, the certifications they have to get, and how they have to approach everything. Theirs are kind of the strictest and the highest standards, which makes you feel good. Like, if you're nervous about flying, knowing that the people in charge of that plane have to do this kind of makes you feel good. But I like going to school where that's how everybody's learning, because even though that's not my goal, it's forcing me to have those same high standards too, which is pretty awesome. And it's also one of those things, being someone who's scared of flying and also thinking that it's, financially not something that's possible, to be doing it just feels incredible. It is expensive, and that's why it's going to take me a lot longer than I would have liked to get my pilot's license, because I can't go multiple times each week or whatever. I go 3 or 4 times a month is pretty much it. And the lessons, if we're doing a classroom lesson or a simulator lesson, that's obviously less expensive than a flight session in the actual airplane, where you're paying for flight time and fuel and all that kind of stuff. So, it's expensive and it takes time, and I would love to do it more, but I'm enjoying it the best that I can right now. And then all the other stuff. Now you got to get a headset. Now you got to get, an iPad. Now you got to get all the things to be more effective and prepared and stuff. But it's been such an amazing experience, and it was kind of like the drums. In a weird way, flying was like the drums, because it's so dependent on physical well-being. The very first thing that you should do if you decide you want to go to flight school is get your medical taken care of, which is, there's different levels of medical clearance that you can get as a pilot. If you want, in the US, if you want to be just a private pilot, which is just like, it's just an average person. Doesn't mean you're flying private jets and stuff. It just means you're an individual private citizen who wants a pilot's license. You need a class 3, a third class medical, which is not too difficult to get. They spend a lot of time checking your heart, a lot of time checking your eyes, and they also look back to see what medications you're on. Unfortunately, things like ADHD medications can be disqualifying, or at least very expensive to go through the process of getting cleared for. So what I looked at that was, I got my medical taken care of. I didn't have anything that was disqualifying, but you very easily could. Like, it doesn't take long, it doesn't take much to disqualify you. And I sort of had this thought of like, this is something I'm interested in. I'd been interested in it since I got my drone license back in 2017, because that was when I took the formal FAA test and started kind of becoming more interested in how flying actually works, both like how a plane works, but also how the system of, airspace and the infrastructure of flying works. And I sort of had this idea of like, human beings have always wanted to fly, like since caveman days. Being up in the sky like a bird has been a thing that people want to do. And it's only in the last like so little blip of time, 100 years-ish, that's actually been possible. So to be alive during that very small window is pretty amazing. And not only is it possible, but it's relatively accessible. It's fine. It is expensive, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility. And, if you're younger too, then there's like scholarships and grants you can get. But every airport, there are so many airports around, and pretty much every airport that's not just a runway probably has some kind of flight school or a flight instructor who will teach you. It's so accessible. Like, there probably is somebody who can teach you how to fly near where you're at right now, or at least relatively close. And then you can just fly a plane. And it's crazy. And the fact that I had all of those things that let me do it, and I was cleared to do it, like medically I was cleared to do it. The only thing was if I wanted to or not. It almost felt at a certain point like I'm obligated to do this. I want to do it and I can do it. And so many people, most people in the world can't do this. And most people in human history it's not even been a possibility for them. How can I not take advantage of this? And that was something that I really wanted to focus on. And every time I've taken on something new, it really kind of helps put everything else in perspective. If you do just have your one thing, like if I'm just doing cameras and AV stuff and YouTube, it's a very narrow perspective, and it's very hard to keep things relative and keep things in perspective. I see, like a very simple example of that would be tech YouTube, where I see people constantly complaining about Apple's iPads, which their lineup is a little confusing at the moment. But I see so many people saying like the iPad mini, the iPad Air, like all these models should be discontinued. Who are they making this for? This is a joke. And then I went into aviation and was like, oh, turns out iPad mini, hugely popular with pilots and in cockpits of planes because it's powerful. It's FAA approved. You can use all the electronic, apps and things to help with your flight. It's also small and compact. Things like the iPad Air, which is the one I have, it's a little bit bigger, but it's still relatively small and compact. Plus, they take Touch ID instead of Face ID. So if it happens to lock while you're flying, you don't have to do this weird thing with your face. You can just touch a button and it unlocks again. Like they're really good for this specific thing. But it's overlooked if you have no idea about that. Like if that's not even something you would think about, why would you even consider that? And so ultimately, learning new things, I think, is what helps give you like a new perspective on what you already know. And maybe even most importantly, it can really alleviate some of those self-limiting beliefs. Let's talk about hockey for a second. So one thing that I didn't expect as someone who has lived in the desert his whole life is to get interested in hockey. But last year, they built a brand new 10,000-seat arena pretty near us. And there's an AHL, which is, if you're not in the U.S., the NFL. This is how much I know about sports. The NHL is the national, like the big hockey league. The AHL is like the minor league hockey. Every AHL team is associated with an NHL team. And so those players, like, hopefully at some point get to a point where they get called up to the bigger team. And they built a new stadium and started a new team. And it's pretty cool. And, we watched them build it the whole time. And when it was opening at the end of last year, Heather and I were like, well, let's go check out a game. It'll be fun. Heather has kind of a background in hockey. She liked it so much that like 10 years ago, she took a couple of hockey camps where, kind of like learn how to skate, learn the basics of playing. But, that was just kind of for fun 10 years ago. And we went to the games and they're super fun. And it turned out the team was actually good. Like I've never been associated with any kind of team that's good at things, and they're really good. And then we kept going to more games, and it was super fun. And the arena also has a public rink, like a smaller a smaller building that has a practice rink in it. So we started going to public ice skating. I have only gone ice skating, I think, twice before in my life, and I hated it so much both times. And I really like Heather's been asking me to go ice skating for years, and I never wanted to go because I had such terrible experiences, and it's just not something I could do. But it's like, okay, let's forget about all that. Let's try something new. Super freaking fun. I can, it took me a while, a couple of times before I could get away from just hanging onto the wall and sort of move in the direction I was hoping to move. And that's about where I'm at right now, honestly. But it's really fun. And it got me like really interested in not just following a hockey team, wanting to learn how to ice skate. And then eventually what I'd like to be able to do is to go to like stick and puck sessions, which are like, they're not hockey games, but it's times where you can bring a stick and a puck, believe it or not, and just sort of like shoot, practice things, just sort of like kind of play hockey on the ice without it being an actual game or without there being any actual pressure and stuff. Obviously, need to learn a little bit more about skating to do that. Heather's been great and super patient at teaching me, but I don't want to force her to do that. I want to be able to enjoy skating with her, at least at like close to her level. So I signed up for ice skating lessons, and it was like $200 for 7 weeks, which is pretty good, I thought. So that is pretty exciting, and I'm super, super excited about that. And that's something I never thought I would do before, even though it's so simple, just because sports were something I never thought I would do before or be interested in. And like I think naturally my own natural tendency is to be a little bit more of an indoor person. Like I love cameras, I love technology, I love video games. Like I love stuff that isn't necessarily related with sports. My biggest interest in sports over the years has been like the broadcasting of them. Like I don't really like watching football, but I love watching how they make football. Like the technology that goes into broadcasting like a pro level football game is insane. And I love that. And I love figuring out how they're doing stuff and seeing how they like, that's what I would always be entertained by if I had to watch a game. But I've never really been interested in sports. And part of that I think is natural. Like I think I just have a tendency of stuff I'm just not as interested in. But I was at the perfect age when the Mighty Ducks came out, like, I don't know, 30 plus years ago at this point. I was at like the perfect age for that movie, and I was so into it, and I thought it was so cool. And I remember like all the kids in my neighborhood would go out and kind of do, I wouldn't even call it street hockey because it wasn't even that official. It was just like hitting stuff in the street with sticks, and some kids had roller skates. And that's as far as it kind of ever went. But I thought, wow, like this movie is so cool. This sport seems super cool. Well, I live in the desert. What can I do that I can't do anything there? And then when I was in high school, I got to go on a trip to the East Coast of the US with a friend whose family, I don't know what the deal was, but they had some kind of hookups, and they got us seats at a playoff game for the NHL. And that was amazing. I think it was between the Penguins and the Capitals, if those are real teams that played a playoff against each other at some point. I think it was a stadium or an arena in Washington, D.C. I don't even remember where we were. It was big. It was NHL. It was a huge game. We had amazing seats, and I loved it. I had so much fun. And since then, anytime anyone asks if I am into sports, I always say, no, not really, but I went to a hockey game once and I thought it was really cool. And that's what happened again. As soon as we started going to hockey games, I really liked the game. It's so much fun. And it's relatively, the finer points, as with anything, are very complex, but the basics are super easy to understand. Like you get the puck into the net of the other team, and that's kind of it. And it's so fast. It's not like football where it stops every 2 seconds and then like start, stop. And that I remember as a kid when my parents would watch football games, I'd be like, when is the game going to be over so I could watch what I want to watch? And it's like, oh, there's only 8 minutes left in this quarter. And I'm like, okay, cool. Why is that taking 2 hours or, felt like 2 hours to get through? Hockey's not quite like that. Like there are stops and things, but it's a whole game, 2.5 hours for the most part. It's not quite like soccer where it's just 90 minutes and that's it. But I don't know, the same way that the base made sense to me, hockey as a sport just made sense to me. I got interested in it. I want to learn more about it. And the thing is with sports and me is I do have the tendency to just be interested in other things, but I also have what I think I've realized I have are self-limiting beliefs when it comes to it, because the only sport that I've ever been interested in and like really done is cycling, which is, it's very easy to do that super duper recreationally and individually. But prior to that, not really anything else. I hated doing PE. I hated doing sports in high school or in middle school and just ever. I hated it. I was on a soccer team for one game in the first grade. So when I was like 7 or 8 years old. And I think it's just because it was like the early 90s and it was like a requirement. Every kid, that was like the birth of the soccer practice, soccer mom thing. And I think every kid just had to join a soccer team, it seemed like. And I remember going to practices and liking the practice because I had 1 or 2 friends on the team and the practices were fun. And then we played our first game and I don't have a lot of memories of it. I remember the thing that I was surprised by was how many of the other kids on the team were just going to hang out with their parents on the sidelines. Like their parents would have Gatorade or whatever, and they would just go over there and hang out with them. And I was thinking, shouldn't we be like in the team area during the whole game, not with parents or family or whatever? And I remember the other memory I have, which is very hazy, but it's really the only thing that I can remember, is at one point I had the ball and I wanted to pass it or do something with it. But so many of my other teammates were sitting on the sideline drinking Gatorade. They weren't even in when they were supposed to be in. And then the other team surrounded me and just started kicking the ball. I don't know what this was. This is clearly not a move. It's just like a bullying tactic or something. They just surrounded me. And so the ball was like getting kicked at me, ricocheting off to another person kicked at me. And everywhere I turned, there was just these like laughing 8-year-old like demons just kicking this soccer ball at me. And I was like, I am out. I do not want to do this anymore. Sports are the worst. And that's sort of how I felt ever since. I don't really know. That was my 8-year-old memory of that game. I don't know what actually was going on there or what. But I remember wanting to quit. And then it was the next week, like on Saturday or whatever, going and telling the coach, like my mom dropped me off and was like, go tell him you want to leave. And I was like, oh, I quit. And he was like, yeah, whatever. Wasn't a big deal, I guess. And, I've always been glad that if there's something I'm not liking or enjoying, I wasn't forced to continue it. But sometimes there are things where I feel like maybe I should have been like encouraged to push through a little bit, especially when it comes to sports or athletics, because they're so far beyond things I'm normally used to. Like if it was time to play sports at school, I didn't know that a lot of the other kids were in Little League and playing games and doing stuff. And so when we would have to play something for PE or recess or whatever, even though we were all in the same grade, doing the same thing, they had so much more experience and skill than I did because they were practicing outside of school. And I wasn't. I didn't know about that. And obviously little kids, especially 30 years ago, I feel like kids are nicer now. Maybe they would be more into teaching. But 30 years ago, at least where I grew up, kids were not good teachers. They were not going to be like, oh, you don't understand how baseball works? Let me explain and show you how to do things. No, it was just like, you suck. Let's call you a slur and be mean to you for the next 6 years. That was kind of what happened to me. And the thing that's weird is like both of my parents split up when I was 9, but prior to that, they were pretty athletic people. My mom to this day is super active and like she cycles constantly and is just a really active person, was always into hiking and camping and stuff, not organized sports, but very active. Although she admits that she's super clumsy. And my dad was also a really active athletic person. He was into kickboxing for a while. He, I believe as a kid, was really into football and like super competitive, into motocross and like really into physical stuff. I don't know if he played a ton of organized sports, but both my parents were outdoorsy, active people. And I was so, as I got older, as much as I, love my parents and I'm not really trying to fault them for this, the one criticism I would have would be when it comes to sports, I sort of developed the belief that if I wasn't immediately good at it, that means I shouldn't do it. If I didn't have some immediate aptitude for it, I feel like that was kind of encouraged. Like, oh yeah, no, you shouldn't do that. That's for someone else. And that's sort of the mentality that I grew up with, is that's for someone else. And that extended to a lot of things, like just feeling things I wanted to do, starting a YouTube channel, whatever. That's for somebody else. It's for other people. It's not for you. And that's just how I viewed myself. And so that made me dislike sports. And it wasn't until we had our local hockey team that we were not just going to games and like, oh, the game was fun, but actually following and paying attention to the rankings and, oh no, this player's injured and they're trading that like following the ups and downs, that suddenly I was realizing, I'm only now realizing I get it. I get why people have team stickers on their cars and, Super Bowl party. Like I get the investment and the fun in watching a team, but I'm someone who can't watch something interesting and not want to do it myself. Like in high school, if we would go see a concert, the next day my friends and I would want to start a band. Like I always want to do the thing that I think is cool. And so seeing a sport, I'm like, I would really love to learn how to play hockey. My previous experience with ice skating was like, we used to have a local ice rink when I was like a 13-year-old, and I went with a friend once, and I remember out of the hour, I think we skated for 10 minutes because I didn't know what to do and I didn't have any fun. And then at some point, maybe like 10 years ago, I was invited to go ice skating, and it was sort of the same experience that I'd had before, where it was like nobody helped explain anything. It was just, oh, you're not good at this? Okay, well, just stand here falling and gripping a wall and we're all going to go skate and nobody's going to help you. And it just was like, this is a pre-Heather situation. And it was just like, this is terrible. I hate this. And prior to that, like I've broken both my wrists, once on roller skates, one jumping off of a swing. I've broken my tailbone, my ankle. Like I've broken a lot of bones from falling. And so I'm scared of falling on hard surfaces. And I didn't know anything about ice. And I was just like, this sucks. I don't want to do it. This is terrible. And then finally, so I was like, okay, I'm going to go with Heather. Every time I have a pre-existing experience, a pre-existing condition, and then I do that thing with Heather, it's different. And so I've learned over the years, like throw those bad associations away. So I was like, let's go ice skating. And of course, Heather, even though she's super good at ice skating, is also super patient. She's not there to show off her skating. She's there to spend time with me. And so she doesn't care if we're going super slow. And so she's helping me figure out, the first time we went, like how to put on the skates, how to step onto the ice, how to hold onto the wall, how to try to move away from like all the basics, so that by the end of that first session, I could at least move a little bit away from the wall. I only fell down once. And then, as we've gone back after that, it's kind of the same thing. She's been super patient, super helpful. I've gotten better, not good, not good at all, but better. Like I don't feel like I need to grip the wall the whole time. I understand what I need to be doing. It's just getting my body to do it is different. Like, I know I shouldn't be like essentially running or walking in the skates, but pushing, whatever. And Heather was one, well, there were lots of people who were being very kind as they were skating by me and giving me like tips. And I don't mean that sarcastically. Like we found a time where they have like 18 and up public skate in the morning. And so there's nobody there on the whole rink. Sometimes there's like 5 people there or 6 people there, which is perfect for me wanting to learn. And a lot of the people there are really good and they're a little bit older. And so they have no problem like giving genuinely helpful tips. And a lot of people are like, you need to stop renting skates. And my logic was, it's not the skates that are holding me back. And also this is a brand new rink, a brand new arena. The skates are brand new. So, I think that's fine. But Heather for Valentine's Day was like, no, I want you to get a pair of skates that are your own, that are fitted to you. And so we drove like pretty far away to like one of the only hockey stores in the area. And it's not in the area because it's really far away. And I spent way too much money on skates that we got like fitted, and they like bake them so they mold to your foot. And then going back with those was like, oh my God, it's not even the same thing at all. I know the rental skates are brand new and they seemed fine, but it's like how a golf cart and a Ferrari are both vehicles. Like, yeah, but also no. It's crazy how different it was. And obviously, I'm still struggling. I'm still slipping and falling and stuff. I have a hurt elbow and a numb pinky at the moment from falling. I ordered pads on the way, don't worry. But every time I've gotten a little better. And I feel very confident that I can not, I'm not going to be playing in the NHL anytime soon. But if I keep going and I keep practicing and I take skating classes, I could be a competent ice skater. And all it takes is time and practice. It's not that thing of me growing up feeling like a lot of stuff. For me, it was a lot of athletics, but it was other things too, is for other people and it's not for me. And I can't do that. And my body can't do that. It was not true. And it's weird because in my mind, it was like, I'm not special enough to be able to do those things. Like, it's silly of me to think that I'm somehow special enough to do something like that. When in reality, I think it's the opposite in that I'm not special enough to not be able to do that because it's just a thing that humans do. And it just takes time and effort. And if you put time and effort into something, you're going to see some kind of results. That's where it's a little different for everybody, but it's just sort of a basic thing. Like if you actually try and you spend time practicing, you're going to improve to some degree. I'm not so special that like those basic laws of nature don't apply to me. And that was, I don't know, that was an important thing to realize, but I'm 37 at this point. And so I feel like it's kind of strange to want to learn how to do this stuff at 37. And with hockey specifically, maybe it happens with other sports, but with hockey, I found so many things online, so many videos, so many like subreddits and message boards and things where people are asking like, am I too old to start? And there's people in their 50s, 60s. I saw something from a 70-year-old that was taking a learn to skate clinic. There is a reasonable limit where it's, if you're at a certain age and falling could kill you, maybe don't go on a hard ice sheet. But for the most part, no, there's nothing wrong with starting a little bit later. There's nothing wrong with learning. It's no big deal at all. I'm still bad at it, but at least I can tell it's possible to get better, and I just need more practice. And it's really fun that my wife is encouraging that. She didn't think it was stupid to get it was her idea to get a pair of skates. I got just for stuff practicing at home, like a stick and some practice pucks and things like that, which don't involve the skates at all, but just learning how to do that kind of stuff just for fun. Never thought it was stupid, never criticized me. I know I'm terrible and I don't know what I'm doing and everything's wrong, but you got to start somewhere. And this is a good place to start, because ultimately the reason I wanted to go through all of these things, not just to share like random stories, although I guess going back to Bailey's message from the beginning, it is a nice way of being able to catch up. This is everything I'm doing. But to kind of go through, for me, a whole lifetime of exploring all these different curiosities, some are related, some are seemingly unrelated, they all kind of come back and benefit in one way or another, even if it's just giving a better perspective on something else and not necessarily like a directly transferable skill set or anything. And one thing that I want to keep doing and that I think is very important is to keep exploring that stuff and not feeling limited, and just not feeling limited, because ultimately your life, however long it is very, very short. There are a lot of really, really interesting things out there to explore. Sometimes you'll stick with them and sometimes you won't, but you really never know how all of that knowledge and experience might connect at some point. And ultimately, it's important to ask yourself, what would you regret more? Would you regret not doing the thing or doing it? Because very rarely do you regret doing something. Most regrets come from things you didn't do. And I think that that's a really important thing to keep in mind, because there are limits on some things. Like, one thing that Heather and I have been talking about lately, I know we're not old. We're at this weird age. Like, being 37 is, you're not young, but you're not old. But I don't think you're technically middle-aged. So everyone's either telling us that we're young or old, but no one's saying like you're the right age. It's super weird. But it's a nice age. It's a fun age. I like it. But there have been times, especially over the past, like, I have injured myself sleeping. I've gone to bed fine and woken up with like a pulled muscle in my neck just because I slept wrong. Both of us tend to make noises when we sit up and sit down. Like, you make the like, ugh, just the life sounds of existing. And it feels like, oh, that's just getting older. And Heather, she has been having issues with like a lot of fatigue and a lot of kind of exhaustion and stuff, and has really been chalking it up to like, man, once you hit your 30s, things just start falling apart pretty quickly. Which is, there are certain areas where that might be true, but then Heather found out, oh no, she's super anemic. And like, even the doctor's like, I don't know how you get out of bed in the morning. Never mind the fact that she exercises every single day and does her work and like takes care of me. Like, she does so much. And even the doctor was like, I don't know how you're standing. And Heather was just like, this is just how it is because I'm old now. But no, it's not. There's a problem that now we're taking all the steps to fix, and she's getting help and for all that. So don't worry too much about it. But the point is, it wasn't just, oh, it's just a thing that's out of my control because I'm old. Not at all. I was watching a Blink-182 video of Travis Barker playing the drums. He's in his 50s at this point. Like, we went and saw the Aquabats last weekend with some friends, which is my favorite band, and they run around and do ridiculous things and wear costumes and are goofy. And when I started going to Aquabats concerts, they were all in their 20s, but now they're all in their 50s. And it's the same show. Like it's the same. But I think there are a lot of people who could easily find themselves saying, I'm 50 now, I can't do this anymore. I'm too old for this. I shouldn't, like, the really cheesy saying of like, don't let age be your cage is actually like really good advice. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. Heather found this older woman that's in one of the gym classes she goes to. It's like a body combat class, not where you're actually fighting with someone, but it's a lot of like punching and kicking and stuff. I go sometimes, but Heather goes a lot. And there's an older woman in there who's like a super gamer. She, a couple years ago, just stumbled into video games, and now every time they're in there, she's talking about how she's upgrading her PC and she needs like a capture card and all this stuff, but she's, I don't know, 60 something. I think that's amazing. I think it's amazing when people are interested in stuff and just trying new things and exploring new things. And I'm grateful that I've had people like, my parents are interested in trying new things, or were interested. My grandparents were interested in that. Even in like his 80s and 90s, my grandpa was interested in figuring out new stuff and trying new things and learning more about stuff, regardless of the age. Age does limit you at a certain point. Even now at 37, it doesn't matter how good I get at ice skating or hockey, I'll never play in the NHL. It cannot happen. And that's okay. Like I understand that, but it doesn't mean I can't learn to skate and learn to play a little bit of hockey and go to a stick and puck session or play some like pickup games at some point. Those are all very possible things that could happen. And one thing that as I was going through a lot of the posts on Reddit about playing hockey at a late age, there was one thing that somebody said in one of them that I thought was amazing advice for anything. And they said, just play like a kid. If you think of a kid playing, they're not thinking about how technically incorrect they are. They're not thinking about how dumb they look. They're not thinking about what's going to happen if they fall. They're just having fun. It's almost like being a dog. Like you're just following your impulse and having fun along the way, as safely and responsibly as possible, of course. But I thought that was like really good advice, because I remember, being a kid, when we were going out in the street and just hitting stuff with brooms and random sticks, trying to play quote unquote hockey, it wasn't like, we had so much fun, even though that was terrible and wrong and unofficial. And it's not that you should accept mediocrity and not try to get better, but that freedom to let yourself explore and learn and figure things out, I think is really important. And I think it's something that we do tend to put away as we get older. And I think we tend to play to our strengths a lot as we get older. We know what we're good at. We know what we're familiar with. We stay in those lanes and we kind of keep other things away because it's scary to be a beginner. It's scary to start from scratch and to make mistakes and to look foolish. But ultimately, like I said, your life is really short and there is no next time. Sometimes you might be doing something. I know I do this. Maybe I go somewhere out of town. Like we went to that hockey shop and it's like, okay. And in my mind, I might think next time we come, I'll get this or I'll look at that. And I know like, well, that's not going to be for a while. Like it's out of town. It's kind of far. I don't know when the next time will be, but there very reasonably could be a next time that we go there. Sometimes that thinking can sort of seep into your actual life where you think like, oh, I'll never be able to do that, or I'll never be able to do this. And it's almost like there's a weird thought, at least in the back of my mind, it's like, oh, next time I'll do that. There is no next time. Like there is no next time, probably. So it's either you do it now or you never get to do the things and you never get to explore it and you never get to try it. And I think that is a very important thing to encourage in yourself and in others, to nurture and to give yourself the freedom to explore, because then the whole world is this like amazingly interesting, just super fun, incredible place. And ultimately the reason I wanted to share all that with you today was to sort of put that, if you have those barriers, those self-limiting beliefs of something isn't for you, or you're incapable of understanding something, you're too old for something, just set all of those limits aside and just let yourself explore your curiosity. And I think as we go through the remaining episodes this season and talk about more concrete things, that might be a helpful thing to keep in mind. So next week, we're going to get a little less philosophical and a little more concrete. Next week's episode is going to be all about choosing the right camera. which sounds very basic. But as I learned, speaking of basic and bases, going through my base course, the first few lessons were just like, the parts of a bass, how to tune it, like stuff that I knew for years, but I still watched all those fundamentals. And sometimes revisiting the fundamentals is a great refresher. You do pick up new things. And if anything else, you remind yourself of how far you've come from being a total beginner that didn't know anything. And now you know all this stuff. And wow, kind of give yourself credit for that. So next week, I want to talk about cameras. And I want to talk about choosing the right camera, all the different things to consider, all the different options that are out there, kind of a deep dive into that, so that if you're looking to upgrade a camera or you're interested at all in cameras, you might have a better idea of how to approach that as helpfully and interestingly as possible. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. Of course, feel free to reach out anytime, send messages if you want for the show. I appreciate it. I'd love to hear your feedback or your thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this. I really appreciate you spending your time with me each week. It genuinely means a lot to me, and I'm looking forward to next week. So thanks for listening. I hope you have a safe, happy, healthy rest of your week, and I will see you next time.